You might not recognize her today, not because time has softened the lines of her face, but because of everything she has endured to wear them with dignity. Sally Field was once the embodiment of Hollywood charm. Sweet, relatable, effortlessly warm. But what the world saw was only the surface. Beneath that smile lived a woman who carried generations of silence, heartbreak, and quiet rebellion. At 78, she is no longer the rising star we met in the golden haze of the 1960. She has become something far more enduring, a symbol of quiet strength, a story etched not in glamour, but in grit. We remember her as the bubbly Gidget, as the tender-hearted mother in Forrest Gump, as Norma Rae, standing alone in a factory, lifting a sign that screamed without a sound. But her real courage unfolded away from the camera. It was in the rooms no one saw, the betrayals no one believed, the nights spent wondering if anyone would ever really hear her. She was never just acting, she was surviving. And with every role, she turned private pain into public truth. So how did the bright-eyed teenager in a nun's habit become the woman who would redefine resilience for an entire generation? What shaped her, broke her, and ultimately made her more whole? This is not just a story of fame or talent. It is a story of becoming, a journey that asks us all to consider what it means to be seen, to be believed, and most of all, to be enough. Before the applause, before the Oscars, before the world took her seriously, Sally Field was just a quiet girl trying to be heard in a house full of silence. Born on the 6th of November, 1946 in Pasadena, California, Sally's earliest memories were shaped by a home that looked beautiful from the outside but left her feeling invisible within. Her mother, Margaret Field, was a working actress whose schedule overflowed with scripts and studio calls. Her father, a decorated World War II veteran, was stern and emotionally distant. When their marriage collapsed, Sally was only 4 years old. What followed was not healing, but a deeper kind of confusion. Her mother remarried actor and stuntman Jock Mahoney, a man whose charm masked darker truths behind closed doors. By the time she was 13, Sally had already been betrayed in the most intimate and unspeakable ways. In her memoir titled In Pieces, she would later describe how her stepfather crossed physical and emotional lines, leaving her with wounds that could not be seen. What broke her more than the abuse was her mother's silence. The absence of protection cut deeper than anything else. School became her shelter, and acting her escape. It wasn't a dream of stardom, it was a survival mechanism. Pretending to be someone else gave her room to breathe. In the classroom, on stage, she wasn't the frightened girl from home. She was anyone but herself. Her first chance came almost by accident. At a party in the early 1962, a talent scout noticed her and invited her to audition. She stepped onto the lot of Columbia Studios not as a polished performer, but as a teenager desperate to matter. It was a whisper of hope after years of silence. Then came Gidget. At just 18 years old, in 1965, Sally Field was cast as the wide-eyed surfer girl in a cheerful beach comedy that lit up American screens. Gidget was sunshine and innocence. She was adored. Fan mail poured in. Her face appeared on lunchboxes and posters. But beneath the laughter was a hollowness she couldn't shake. Producers saw her as America's sweetheart, but Sally felt reduced to something small, something safe. Gidget paid the bills, but it didn't feed the part of her that was still screaming to be heard. 2 years later, in 1967, she returned to television in The Flying Nun. It was a quirky sitcom built on an absurd premise, and it made her a household name. The costume, the habit, the cheerful smile, it all masked the fact that Sally Field was already struggling with an identity that didn't belong to her. She played the role with professionalism, but inside, she felt like she was being trapped. Audiences laughed. Producers smiled. But Sally wanted more. She wanted to dig deep, to tell stories that carried weight, to be taken seriously. But no one believed the bubbly girl in the nun outfit could handle serious drama. So she walked away, from 1968 to 1971. At the height of her fame, she turned down every sitcom offered to her. She chose silence again, but this time, it was intentional. She enrolled in Lee Strasberg's actor's studio and poured herself into the intense method training that would reshape her entire career. It was there, under the harsh lights of rehearsal spaces and the quiet discipline of emotional excavation, that Sally began to shed the image others had built around her. The training was grueling. At times, she felt like quitting. Doubts clawed at her every day. She wondered if she had thrown away her one chance at success, if anyone would ever take her seriously. But something inside her refused to give in. Hollywood had moved on. Casting directors assumed she had faded out. But Sally was not gone. She was sharpening herself like a blade. In 1976, her moment finally arrived. She was cast in Sybil, a harrowing television film based on the true story of a woman living with multiple personalities. It was a role that demanded vulnerability beyond imagination. Sally portrayed 13 distinct identities, each with a different voice, expression, and emotional rhythm. It was the kind of performance most seasoned actresses would fear. She dove into it completely. When Sybil aired, the response was immediate. Critics were stunned. Audiences were breathless. Sally Field was no longer a lightweight. She won her first Emmy, and more importantly, she finally heard the words she had waited her whole life for. "You are a serious actress." But her climb had only just begun. And the next chapter would test everything she had fought so hard to rebuild. After Sybil, the applause came louder. But it did not silence the doubts that still lived inside her. Sally Field had proven herself, yet the industry continued to see her through the blurry lens of her past. One powerful role did not erase years of typecasting. One award did not mend everything that had been broken. And so, she kept climbing. In 1979, came a role that would redefine her legacy. Norma Rae, a Southern textile worker who stands up against a corrupt system, a character both grounded and fearless. For Sally, this was not just a job, it was a reckoning. She poured into the role the grit of a childhood spent unheard, the strength of a woman who had endured private storms no script could capture. When she stood alone on the factory table, holding a sign that read, "Union," she wasn't just acting. She was reclaiming her voice. Her performance earned her an Academy Award. It was a victory not born from glamour but from survival. A moment where she wasn't just seen, she was believed. But that win also brought its own kind of weight. Every new role became a test. Could she do it again? Could she keep proving herself over and over? She did. In 1984, she returned with Places in the Heart, a story of loss, resilience, and quiet courage, set in the shadows of the Great Depression. Sally immersed herself in rural life, learning how to run a farm, understanding the loneliness and desperation of her character. That year, she stood on the Oscars stage again, this time with a tearful, unfiltered confession. "You like me. Right now, you like me." It was not just a thank you. It was a release. A cry from someone who had spent most of her life wondering if she was enough. The 1982nd and early 1992nd became a stretch of golden roles. She broke hearts in Steel Magnolias, brought both wit and sadness to Mrs. Doubtfire, and gave one of her most beloved performances as the mother in Forrest Gump. With every film, she wove tenderness and strength together. Her characters didn't shout, they endured. They spoke softly but left deep echoes. Behind the camera, however, the pressures never eased. As she aged, the roles offered to her began to shrink. Hollywood's unspoken rule was now closing in. Women over 40 were often pushed to the background. But Sally pushed back. She chose her projects carefully, demanding substance, refusing to vanish quietly. In 2012, her performance as Mary Todd Lincoln in Steven Spielberg's historical drama reminded the world that her fire still burned bright. She gained weight for the role, dug into historical archives, and explored the emotional chaos of a woman too often misjudged. Her work earned her yet another Oscar nomination. It was a reminder that her artistry had only deepened with time. But her personal life during these decades was not without turmoil. Behind the applause, there were fractures. There was love, but also pain. 2 marriages had come and gone. The romance with Burt Reynolds, once the envy of tabloids, had left invisible bruises. Publicly glamorous, privately volatile, he doubted her talent, questioned her worth, and withdrew support when she needed it most. She stayed longer than she should have, believing love could fix what cruelty had damaged. When she finally walked away, it was not with triumph. It was with quiet grief and hard-earned wisdom. For almost 3 decades, they never spoke again. Not until the end of his life, when Burt called to say the words she had longed to hear. "You were the love of my life." But by then, it was too late. She had let go. And for the first time, she had chosen to love herself more than the idea of being loved. Her second marriage to producer Alan Greisman brought a different kind of peace. For a while, it felt like stability. Together, they had a son named Sam. Years later, when Sam came out as gay, Sally embraced him completely. Their bond deepened, and her advocacy for LGBTQ rights became one of her most personal causes. It was not just politics, it was love. But even that marriage would eventually end. Not with fury or betrayal, but with quiet sadness. A slow unraveling of 2 lives growing apart. She had learned to recognize the signs. This time, she did not wait to disappear. She left before she lost herself. Through it all, Sally never stopped working. But in 1988, just when she thought the worst was behind her, life delivered a terrifying shock. A plane crash. Just seconds after takeoff in Aspen, the small jet she and her family were on collided with another aircraft on the runway. Metal shrieked. Smoke filled the cabin. In those moments, she truly believed the end had come. They survived. Physically, they walked away with only minor injuries, but the emotional aftermath was different. For months, she replayed the moment in her head. The sound of the engine failing, the heat, the smell of fuel, her own voice crying out. It left no scars that the world could see, but inside, something had shifted. She described it later as the moment that redrew her life's priorities. After that crash, fame mattered less. Applause faded. She stopped chasing the next role and started seeking something gentler, something honest. The shift was not sudden, but it was lasting. Today, Sally Field lives in a different kind of spotlight. One not cast by cameras or interviews, but by the quiet, golden light of late afternoon sun falling across her garden in Pacific Palisades. Her home sits high above the coast, facing the vastness of the Pacific Ocean, where the waves whisper back every triumph and wound she has carried through the years. At 78, she no longer seeks Hollywood's approval. Her days are no longer built around film sets or award seasons. Instead, they revolve around something simpler and deeper. Mornings with her grandchildren, afternoons in the soil, evenings with a book or an old black and white movie glowing softly on the screen. Her house is not grand by celebrity standards. It is warm, lived in, full of family photos, handwritten notes, and the quiet weight of memories. She drives a hybrid SUV. She eats mostly plants. She practices yoga at sunrise and walks when the day is still gentle. It is not about routine, it is about presence. There was a time when she avoided mirrors, when she saw only what she lacked. Now she looks at her reflection with acceptance. The lines do not bother her. They tell the story of someone who earned every crease with courage. She has said that aging gracefully means not fighting time, but greeting it with open arms, with clarity, with peace. Her 3 sons remain the center of her world: Peter, Eli, Sam. They grew up watching their mother wrestle with Hollywood, with heartbreak, with the haunting need to be seen for who she truly was. And they saw her rise again and again. When Sam came out, she did not hesitate. She did not stumble over tradition or fear. She embraced him with the full strength of a mother who understood what it means to hide and what it means to be free. That moment deepened her mission. She became an outspoken advocate for LGBTQ rights, not from a distance but from the center. In 2012, she accepted the Human Rights Campaign's Ally for Equality Award. Her speech was not a performance, it was a promise. She has done the same for women, partnering with organizations that lift female voices, marching for climate justice beside Jane Fonda, risking arrest not for attention but for truth. When she speaks, it is with the weight of a life that has witnessed injustice and refused to look away. And yet, it is her health that has asked her to slow down in recent years. In 2005, she was diagnosed with osteoporosis, a condition that erodes the bones without warning. For someone so physically expressive on screen, the news felt like a betrayal. But rather than retreat, she chose to speak up. She launched a campaign to raise awareness and encourage early screening. She made her own pain a platform for prevention. There are days when the stiffness is stubborn, when she moves more slowly, when memory arrives in flickers. But Sally meets those days with the same quiet resolve that has carried her through every chapter. She listens to her body. She moves with care. She adjusts. She does not resent the changes. She honors them. When she appears in public now, it is only when it matters. A cause, a story, a voice that needs lifting. She no longer needs to be seen to feel valuable. She knows her worth. In 2018, she released her memoir, a raw, unflinching account of her childhood, her marriages, her pain. She wrote it, she said, as a gift to the little girl she once was, the one who sat in silence while the world refused to listen. That girl, she believes, would be proud of the woman she has become. Her evenings are now spent on her back deck, a cup of tea in hand, the ocean stretching endlessly before her. Sometimes a grandchild curls up beside her. Sometimes it is just her and the sky. The applause is gone. The cameras are off. But something brighter remains. A life lived fully. When we look at Sally Field today, we are not just looking at a successful actress. We are seeing a survivor who turned silence into speech. A woman who refused to let pain define her story and instead used it to shape something lasting, something honest. She did not age the way Hollywood expects women to. She did not cling to youth with surgeries or hide her years behind filters. She let time carve its lines. She let life leave its marks. And in doing so, she showed what it means to age with dignity, not just in appearance but in spirit. There was a time when producers dismissed her, when directors said she was too small for serious roles, when men she loved told her she was not enough. But she never stopped searching for her voice. And when she found it, the world could not look away. She gave us characters who felt real, not perfect, not polished, but raw and unforgettable. From Sybil to Norma Rae, from the grieving mother in Steel Magnolias to the quiet strength of Mrs. Gump, she gave us women who bled, who fought, who stayed kind even when the world did not. And through those performances, she gave permission for millions of people to feel deeply, to cry, to remember, to forgive themselves. Is she the same woman she was when she first walked onto a studio lot at 18? Number. She is quieter now, more private, less concerned with being liked, but she is also more powerful because she no longer needs to prove anything. She has already done it. And yet, There is something so beautifully human about the way she continues to show up, not to be adored, but to serve, to speak up for others, to lift those who are still trying to find the courage she once had to fight for herself. In the story of Sally Field, there are no villains and no perfect endings, just choices, some painful, some brave, all of them honest. We often ask whether our heroes are still who they used to be, whether we prefer the star they were or the person they have become. But with Sally Field, that question fades, because her journey has never been about who she was. It has always been about who she is becoming. And maybe that is the greatest lesson she offers us. That strength is not about being untouched by pain. It is about what you do with it, how you carry it, how you turn it into light for someone else. Some stories end with a final scene. Others fade slowly like the last glow of sunset across the ocean. Sally Field's story does not close with credits. It lingers. It stays with you. Like a line from a film you never forget. Like a quiet strength you feel without needing to name. She lives now in a rhythm far removed from Hollywood's rush. There are no roles to chase, no cameras to impress. Only the sound of laughter from her grandchildren, the softness of morning light through her kitchen window, the peace of watching flowers grow where once there was nothing but silence. And yet, her presence is everywhere, in the faces of the women she inspired, in the voices of those who speak more boldly because she once dared to, in every child who felt unseen until someone like her gave them a story that made them feel visible. She may no longer grace the screen as often, but she still plays a role, the role of a matriarch, a truth teller, a quiet guide for those who are still finding their way through storms. Time may have softened the edges of her fame, but it has sharpened the clarity of her soul. She is not the young girl in a flying nun costume anymore. She is not the weeping daughter or the smiling mother who told Forrest that life was like a box of chocolates. She is something rarer, a woman who turned every bruise into a lesson, every wound into wisdom, every silence into a song that still echoes today. In a world that often forgets its legends, once they step out of the spotlight, Sally Field reminds us that true legacy is not written in applause. It is written in the lives we touch, the truths we tell, and the grace we carry through time. She does not need the spotlight anymore. She has something brighter, a light that comes from within. And perhaps that is the greatest ending of all. Not a curtain fall, but a soft, steady glow that tells us she is still here, still standing, still shining. For those of us who grew up watching her, who found comfort in her voice, who saw parts of our own pain reflected in her characters, Sally Field remains a part of our story too. Not just then, but now.